The dog wasn't supposed to survive. Not with a blood trail that long. Not with the way its legs shook when it limped into the junkyard just before dawn. Earl Lacey had seen animals hit by trains before, but this K9 was different. Scarred, trained, eyes full of fear but purpose too. Earl crouched low, heart hammering. He had no business taking the dog in, but something about the way it leaned into him like it knew made him wrap it in his coat and bring it inside. He didn't call the cops. He should have. 3 days later, they came for him. The freight train thundered by, shaking the tin walls of Earl's auto shop, even though it was 200 yards off the main line. He'd always hated that sound. Too many memories from too many nights lying awake, thinking about things he couldn't fix. Earl was tightening a rusted bolt on a '99 Bronco when he heard the scrape. Not a metallic clank or engine groan. This was soft, dragging, slow. He leaned out from beneath the chassis. Nothing. Then the scrape again, this time closer. He rose to his feet, wiped his hands on his oil-soaked rag, and stepped out into the early morning air. The sun hadn't quite broken the treetops. Fog clung low, and the air carried that particular silence rural mornings have, expectant, like the earth was holding its breath. Then he saw it, a German shepherd. No collar, limping badly. Its right hind leg was shredded raw, red against the beige and black fur. One ear stood upright, the other flopped. It wasn't just limping, it was struggling to stay upright. Earl didn't speak, didn't move. He crouched slowly, knuckles pressed to the gravel. The dog's chest rose fast and shallow. Blood matted the fur along its ribs, and something about its eyes. It wasn't fear. It was focus, as if it had come here on purpose. "Easy, boy," Earl whispered, voice thick from years of Marlboros and silence. "Ain't gonna hurt you." The dog made it 3 more steps, then collapsed in the oil-stained dirt. Earl didn't take it to a vet. Not because he didn't want to, because he didn't trust them. In Hawthorne County, word traveled faster than cell reception. You show up with a wounded K9 and no answers. Questions start faster than stitches. He wrapped the dog in his flannel jacket, carried it to the back room of the shop, his break room that stank of stale coffee and axle grease, and laid it on an old military cot. He'd served in '98 Kosovo, carried enough wounded to know this dog had fought hard to get here. That night, Earl sat by the cot, holding a flashlight in one hand and tweezers in the other. He picked out shrapnel, cleaned the leg with isopropyl and old cotton shirts. The dog whimpered once, only once, then laid still, eyes watching. "Don't die on me," Earl muttered, pouring peroxide over the gash. "I don't bury strays. Not anymore." The dog licked his hand. Just once, like it hurt him. By the second morning, the dog could sit up. Earl tried not to get attached. He told himself it had run off once it healed. But the dog didn't run. It didn't bark. It stayed by Earl's side, even limping along behind him between toolboxes and busted hoods. And it was smart. Too smart. It sniffed every visitor before letting them pass. Wouldn't eat until Earl did. The way it scanned the tree line before lying down at night, like it expected something to come back. Then there was the tag. On day 3, Earl found it under the cot, a small, scorched metal plate lodged in the dog's matted fur. Barely legible, but there was no mistaking the inscription. K9 unit. Do not separate. Asset 72 B/classified. Earl froze. He hadn't seen military issue like this since overseas. Not police. Not local. Something federal. He stared at the dog, now sleeping, chest rising and falling with shallow peace. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. That night, headlights pierced the fog outside the shop. Earl stood from the cot. He hadn't called anyone. No customers were scheduled. He shut off the lights, heart kicking faster, and peered through the blinds. 2 black SUVs. No plates. The kind you see in movies. The kind that don't belong in a town like Garrett's Hollow. Before he could move, the shop door shook under a hard knock. Earl Lacey. A voice calm, cold. "Open up. Federal agents." The dog was already on its feet. It didn't bark. It growled low, guttural, a sound from deep in its chest that Earl hadn't heard until now. The knock came again, this time louder. Earl opened the drawer below the workbench, felt the cold steel of the revolver he kept there. He opened the door slow. 3 men stood outside, black windbreakers. No visible weapons, but the bulges under their coats said otherwise. You're in possession of federal property, the man in front said. Early 40s, clean-cut, eyes like polished glass. We need the dog. Earl stepped out, shutting the door behind him. Didn't know he was government issue. He's not a pet, Mr. Lacey. He's part of an active investigation. Earl didn't answer. Behind the door, the dog was growling again. The agent's eyes flicked toward the door. Did he speak? Earl blinked. Speak. The agent leaned in, voice lower. Has the dog responded to verbal prompts? You talk like he's a machine, Earl said. He's hurt. He showed up bleeding to death by my lot. The agent's jaw flexed. This conversation is over. Step aside. He moved to push past. Earl blocked him. Hand still on the doorframe. You got a warrant? The silence was long. The agent smiled. Didn't think you'd ask. You're a mechanic, not a lawyer. Earl held his ground. Mechanic who served. I know the law. You show me a piece of paper, or you walk. They didn't like that. The man in front turned to the others. A nod, a twitch of the eye. Earl expected handcuffs. Maybe a shove. What he didn't expect was a sound behind him, the unmistakable click of teeth, then a growl that turned into a roar. The dog launched through the door like a cannonball, straight for the agent. Earl barely grabbed its harness in time. It writhed in his grip, barking savagely, teeth inches from the agent's throat. The man stepped back fast, hand going to his hip, but Earl shouted. Call him OFF, he barked. I got him. The dog stopped, still growling, still watching. The agent adjusted his coat, face tight. We'll be back, he said. Then they left. Inside, Earl locked everything, boarded the windows, kept the revolver on the counter. The dog, still tense, paced the room like it was trained for this exact scenario. What kind of damn war did you crawl out of? Earl muttered. He opened a beer, gave the dog a slice of ham, sat in silence. Later that night, when the storm came in hard and the wind moaned through the cracked eaves, the dog nudged something under the couch with its nose. Earl leaned down. It was a flash drive, covered in blood. The power flickered just once when Earl plugged the flash drive into his old shop laptop. For a moment, he wondered if it would fry the machine. He hadn't booted it in weeks. But it whirred to life, fan groaning, screen cracked in one corner. The folder on the drive was unmarked. No name, no date, just one video file. Earl glanced at the dog, who now sat in the corner, ears perked but no longer growling. Its eyes didn't leave the screen, like it knew what was coming. Earl hit play. The footage was raw, bodycam style, time-stamped just 6 days ago. A team of 5 moved through what looked like an abandoned warehouse. It was night, but their night vision lenses cast everything in sickly green. One of the men in frame was holding the camera, the rest armed and sweeping in formation. Earl leaned forward. In the back of the formation, a dog, his dog, wearing a black tactical vest marked Asset 72B. The audio kicked in. We're live. 0 contact so far. Breach in progress. Southeast entrance. Earl adjusted the volume. Static buzz, then a voice, calm, female, from someone off-screen. Confirmed. Be advised. Do not engage unless the target speaks. The screen flashed as a door was kicked open. Gunfire erupted. Screams. Confusion. Then chaos. The camera spun. Someone shouted, "He's not human, he's not." Then a horrible, wet crunch. The dog in the back leapt forward, tackling a man to the floor. Not to attack, to pull him back. That's when the image froze. The file corrupted. Earl sat there, hands trembling. The drive clicked and hissed, like it couldn't handle the playback anymore. He tried again. Same result. But one thing was clear. The dog had seen something, and that something hadn't come from around here. By the next morning, Earl knew they'd be back. He didn't sleep, just sat by the cot, shotgun across his lap, the K9 at his side. Every car that passed outside, made him flinch. Every wind gust at the windows made him rise. At dawn, he took the dog outside. The limp was better, but still there, still raw around the sutures. They walked to the edge of the lot, past the junk trucks and rusting sedans, until they reached the spot near the train tracks, where the dog had first collapsed. The gravel was still stained. Blood. Dried now, but the trail pointed away from the tracks, not toward them. Earl narrowed his eyes. That meant the dog hadn't come from the train. He had crossed it. The K-9 sniffed the air, then looked into the woods, and didn't move. By 10:42 a.m., Earl had company again. This time, it wasn't just 3 agents. It was 7, and one of them wore a badge. FBI. They didn't knock. They surrounded the lot. Black SUVs. Silent men in windbreakers. One woman in a gray trench coat stepped forward, mid-40s, black gloves, hair pulled back tight, like she hated movement. She had a face like a school principal who never raised her voice, but always knew when you were lying. "Mr. Lacey," she said, not asking. Earl stepped out of the garage. The dog followed, tense. "I ain't giving you the dog," Earl said flatly. She ignored that. "I'm Special Agent Murrin. Mind if we talk?" I got the impression this isn't a polite conversation. Behind her, 3 men adjusted their jackets in sync. Murrin nodded slightly. "Fair enough. Then I'll be direct." She pulled out a photo, held it up. A man's face, mid-30s, hollow eyes, deep scars around the mouth. "Do you know this man?" Earl frowned. "No." "You're sure?" I said no. She slipped the photo away. "He's dead now, but he killed 4 of our agents. 2 civilians. Left a child blind. He was part of something you don't want to be involved with. What's that got to do with a dog bleeding in my lot?" Murrin's eyes shifted. "You found Asset 72B. It escaped protocol after the incident." "Escaped," Earl repeated. "Like a prisoner?" "Like an experiment," she said flatly. Asset 72B is not a dog. It's a classified retrieval unit. Earl clenched his jaw. "Looks like a dog. Bleeds like one, too." She took a step forward. "It's programmed to survive. And it saw things in that warehouse that were never meant to be seen." The dog let out a low, chest-deep growl. "You lost control," Earl said. "Didn't you?" Murrin didn't blink. "Mr. Lacey, if that K-9 imprints on you, it's already too late. It will protect you, even from us." Earl looked down at the dog. It wasn't wagging. It wasn't scared. It was waiting. That night, Earl packed a bag. He hadn't left town in 6 years. But there was something about the way Murrin had looked at him that told him staying meant disappearing. He stuffed the flash drive in a Ziploc, wrapped it in an oil rag, stuffed it under the back seat of his old Chevy pickup. The dog hopped into the passenger side without command, like it had been waiting to leave. As they pulled out of the lot, Earl looked in the rear view. 2 black SUVs were parked across the train tracks, lights off, engines idling, watching. They drove east away from Garrett's Hollow, past Route 12, past the edge of radio reception, past the place Earl buried his war medals years ago. They didn't talk, but every now and then the dog would whine, not from pain, from something else. It started happening around 3 a.m. The dreams. Earl had always had them, dust explosions, that scream he couldn't forget from Kosovo. But these were new. A man's voice speaking backwards. A room full of mirrors. The image of the dog staring into a surgical lamp, motionless, as men in gloves injected something into its spine. He woke soaked in sweat. The dog was sitting by the window, unmoving, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, staring, not out the window, at him. By the time they reached a motel near Winton Creek, Earl was starting to wonder if the agents were the least of his worries. He'd left the dog in the truck while he went inside, got the key, paid cash, asked no questions. When he returned, there were paw prints on the inside of the windshield, clawed, as if the dog had stood up. When Earl opened the door, the dog was back in the passenger seat, sitting calm, head tilted, no blood, no scratches, just waiting. That night, he played the flash drive again. This time, a second file had appeared. No name, just a timestamp. Earl hesitated, then clicked. It was a security cam, black and white, dated 4 days ago. The location, a train station. Their train station. The camera watched as Murrin and 2 other agents approached a family waiting on the platform. A woman, a man, and a boy no older than 7. The agents showed no badges. The man stepped forward. A flash, then blood. The boy screamed. Earl's breath caught. The camera cut out. No context. Just murder. He couldn't sleep after that. And now the dog sat closer than ever. Ears alert. Body tense. But not toward the door. Toward him. And Earl began to wonder, was the dog protecting him? Or watching him for someone else? The morning fog outside the Winton Creek Motel was dense enough to choke on. It rolled in thick, low to the asphalt, muffling the world. Earl stepped out of room 6 with a thermos of black coffee and the dog pacing his heel, its eyes darting toward every shadow like it expected the fog to bite. He hadn't slept, not after what he saw on the second flash drive file. That woman, Murrin, the agent, killed someone, a civilian, maybe more than one. No warning, just a blink of motion and a body on the ground. Clean, like she'd done it before. And the boy's scream, it still rang in Earl's ears. He opened the truck's tailgate and reached underneath the spare tire, pulled out the .45 he hadn't used since '05. Still loaded, still cold. You still with me? He asked the dog. The K9 sat, alert, watching. You're not going to turn into some machine on me, right? No answer, of course, but looked at him, head tilted, ears high, waiting. Earl sighed. Let's find out what they're so scared of. At the Winton Creek Library, there was one public computer and a kid behind the counter who didn't ask questions, mostly because he was busy watching videos on mute. Earl slipped the $20 into the donation box and logged on. He uploaded the flash drive to an encrypted cloud storage. Took 10 minutes on the slow connection. While it loaded, he opened a few forums. Type in Asset72B and you get nothing, not even conspiracy blogs. But when he searched Federal Retrieval Dog plus train station shooting, a single result pinged. Deleted post. Archived. They're training dogs for classified ops. One escaped after a failed raid. Rumor says it imprinted on someone in Hawthorne County. Agents are hunting him now. No warrant. No names. Just dead ends and silence. Earl's blood turned cold. Then the kid at the counter said, "Sir, there's, some people here asking about a dog." Earl grabbed the flash drive. The K9 was already moving, tail stiff, body low. Outside, the fog had lifted, and the black Suburban was parked across the street. Murrin stepped out, alone this time, gloves off. A fine red scar now ran from her temple to her chin. She didn't shout, just walked across the lot. Calm as ice. "You gave the footage to someone, didn't you?" she asked. No preamble. "Tell me who." Earl's hand stayed near his jacket pocket. "Who were those people?" he asked. "The family at the train station. The ones your men killed." Murrin's eyes flicked. Not surprised, just disappointed. "They were carrying something," she said. "Inside the boy, a biological. Then arrest them. Don't butcher them." Murrin took one slow breath. "Earl, you're in possession of a Class 7 asset. This dog, Asset72B, isn't a rescue. It's an autonomous retrieval prototype. We built it to recognize and remember trauma, to find what others cannot." She stepped closer. "And you're interfering with an operation bigger than you'll ever understand." The K9 stood between them now, shoulders squared, a growl low in its throat. "Then why is it protecting me?" Earl asked. Murrin's gaze hardened. "Because it remembers what you did." Earl froze. "What the hell does that mean?" "You were at Outpost Wexford in '98, she said. "Kosovo. Same village where we lost the first K9 unit. Same trauma pattern. Same signature." Earl's mouth went dry. "I've never seen anything like this," Murrin said. "It didn't just imprint on you. It chose you. That doesn't happen." The dog's eyes flicked up to him. Murrin stepped closer. Give it back. Before it forgets who the enemy is. The K9 barked. Loud, sharp, different. It wasn't fear. It was warning. Earl turned just in time to see the second agent step from behind the building, gun drawn. Too late. A single crack of a rifle split the air. The bullet missed Earl by inches, hit the concrete beside him with a hard, echoing ping. The dog lunged. It slammed into the shooter with a bone-crushing crunch, teeth sinking deep into the man's arm. He screamed, gun skittering across the pavement. The other agents moved in from the alley. Murrin didn't flinch. You brought this on yourself, she said coldly. Earl fired twice. Missed once. The second shot grazed a man's leg. He fell hard. He and the dog ran. They didn't stop until they reached the woods past Route 30. Earl's lungs burned. He hadn't run like this in 20 years. The K9 didn't slow, even with its healing leg. It weaved through the trees like it knew the terrain. They found shelter in an old hunting shack Earl remembered from years back. Boards nailed across windows. Bullet holes in the roof. Mold thick in the corners. He collapsed inside, chest heaving. The dog paced by the doorway, then sat, watching. It didn't breathe hard. Didn't look tired. Just aware. What do you remember? Earl asked. The dog looked at him, then limped to the far wall, and started scratching. Earl stood, pulled aside an old cot. Underneath, carved into the floorboards, was a word, Pinewood, and a string of numbers. The coordinates led to a clearing north of Lake Pinewood, old farmland, left abandoned for years after the chemical spill. Locals said it was poisoned. Trees didn't grow right. Birds never landed there. But the GPS confirmed it. That's where the footage came from. That's where the warehouse was. That's where it started. They reached it by nightfall. Earl parked in the trees, headlights off. The dog jumped out without waiting. No bark, just that steady gait. The warehouse stood like a dead tooth in the ground. Half collapsed, windows broken, steel rusting in deep streaks. And the moment Earl stepped inside, he smelled it. Ash, blood, ammonia, then movement, not from a person, from the walls. Reflections shimmered in broken glass. Half-seen shadows twitched where they shouldn't. Earl raised a flashlight, and there on the far side of the room was a table, surgical, strapped, chains on each leg. The K9 froze, then walked slowly forward. Earl followed. On the wall behind the table, scrawled in black marker, trauma binds, and a list of names. The first, K9, Unit 72B, subject, Mercer. Earl's knees went weak. He remembered that name, Mercer, a corporal who died saving 3 children during a massacre in Kosovo. The dog sat down by the table, calm, still, and for the first time, Earl understood it wasn't just trained. It was implanted, with memories, with trauma, with sacrifice. It had been built around someone who died with honor. That's why it had come to him, not as a soldier, as a brother. A spotlight slammed through the window. Earl spun. Murrin's voice on a loudspeaker. Earl Lacey, step away from the asset. Final warning. The dog didn't move. Neither did Earl. He walked to the table, picked up something glinting under the dust. A dog tag. Mercer JL. K9 handler, U.S. Army, Kia. It wasn't a lab. It was a grave. The wall behind the table exploded. Flashbang. Earl hit the ground hard. Ears ringing. Voices shouted. Gunfire. He tried to crawl. Someone grabbed his jacket. But then, a scream. Not human. Not animal. A howl that cracked through steel and bone and rage. The K9 was loose, tearing through shadows. Gunfire dropped off. Silence. Then, footsteps. Closer. The dog stood in the smoke. Bleeding. Shaking. But alive. Murrin lay slumped against the wall, eyes wide open. Dead. Earl drove west. He didn't stop for 3 states. The dog slept in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket. The flash drive, destroyed. The footage, buried. But the memories? Still there. They bought a small cabin in Idaho. No cell towers. No visitors. Just trees and snow and time. Some nights, Earl still wakes up, shaking. The dog is always there. Silent, watching, but never threatening, only guarding. Because some wounds never heal, and some guardians never leave, even when the war is long over.